Episode two was intriguing. It definitely got more supernatural. Is that a word?
It is
With
now.
with Miss Lucy appearing everywhere in windows. Poor Nancy. Our girl is going through it, and she's still trying to solve mysteries and break into morgues and get down to the bottom of what happened.
Nancy just does not give up. She got arrested this episode. I don't know, I really I love this show so much. I was watching it and I was thinking this really feels so CW in a way that hasn't existed since like the tens.
Mhm.
Um but yeah, I really enjoyed this episode. The early on in the episode, the police station scene was really giving me Veronica Mars. And I know it's kind of blasphemous to compare Nancy Drew to Veronica Mars because Veronica Mars was inspired by Nancy Drew, I'm sure, at some juncture. Um, but I'm talking about like this specific show and Veronica Mars, just like her relationship to the cops, her like not really giving a crap about authority. Um, I think that's really an important shade of this character of Nancy to like be very confident and steadfast in her own convictions. Um, but yeah, I love how this episode continues to like unravel all of the characters and get deeper into the mysteries. Whew, her dad. I don't want to. I feel like I brought up so many different points, but her dad.
Yeah, I felt like they were starting to hint towards something there, and then the conversation he had with her in the police station, it kind of quashed those worries. And
But did it though? I was like, Nancy, be smarter. Him saying that he used the dress as a prank for
oh
the
yeah,
mom.
Yeah.
I was like, in what world do you use a bloody prom dress as a prank? I can't. That's the one thing I will say. Like, I don't believe Nancy would have believed that. Sorry, Michael, to interrupt you,
no,
but
no, I totally get it. I remember thinking that when we had the flashback again of him and his wife taking the dresser out of the ground or putting it in whatever. I remember thinking, do we really? Is this really a 1 to 2 episode arc that's wrapped up and done? There was definitely more to it than that. He did cover himself very well. That was a very playful way he spoke. He had an answer for everything she asked, and maybe it
well,
is
he's a
because
lawyer.
very true. Maybe it's
Not
because
sorry to all the lawyers, but like you guys think quick on your feet. I'm just saying.
but the fact is, she clearly has blinders up when it comes to him, and it's funny to say that because she is calling him out for everything he's done right out of the bat. But maybe it's just the fact you always do see that the hero can never see what's right under their nose. So maybe she'll figure it out. Obviously, she'll eventually figure it out as it goes on. But I do think that added some spice to it because up until this point, the father had been very kind um of course he has his issues, but he was very nice. He was offering advice, but like stay away. He's very, very dad-like. And of course, we all thought there would be more to it than that. Now it turns out there's way more to it than that. So we'll see what that means. But I will say the aesthetic of the show, the tone of the show, I'm not really right sure of the right word to describe it, but it's just it's wonderful and right from the surface level right into the stories. It all blends together so well. And the scenes in the police station as well. The fact that she has such like that banter with the police officer, the chief, who is so eager to arrest her. The fact that they're not really taking the fact that they're suspects seriously because she's so convinced she can solve this problem. And one of my favorite things about this was the dynamics in the episode. And I know I said that about the pilot as well, but you got to see like how her dynamic with George unfold, how she finally learned some of her behavior in the past wasn't acceptable. But at the same time, George kind of came to see that all these people might actually be her friends. Of course, there's still mysteries. Like Ace has still got that underlying mystery, or he's photographing people. And Bess is still keeping secrets about where she lives. But I do love watching each of the dynamics unfold. And now the dad one suddenly become the most interesting one. But there's so many layers to the story, and this episode became so much more supernatural now that even Nancy's starting to believe in it. And I can't wait to see where it goes next. Every time it ends, I'm like, oh, I want it to flick on the next one.
I think this episode proved that Nancy is a big old softie.
Mhm.
Like, there's so like with her father, like the lie was what it was. It should not have held up in the light, but she wants to believe her dad so bad that she just accepts it. Or like, as soon as her dad gave her an out for Nick, we were right back to being comfortable with Nick again. Or like she, with George, like she caught her, but then she thought about their history together, so she was soft about it. And I was like, you know what, you're right, I'm being judgy. Like, so I was like, Nancy, you want people. You say you don't want people, but you do. You've somehow like gotten like, what is it, 4 people now that she hadn't been hanging out with before, but she is now, and they've kind of become her little group in only 2 episodes, and it works. And I do love that George helped in the end. I want her to stay with Mr. Hudson, though. I know eventually she will, because, but still.
Yeah, it's weird. I love George in this episode. I loved when Ace and Bess were having their moment at the Claw. That's what it's called, right? The Claw. And George comes barging in. She's like, I have a bag full of body parts, and Nancy got arrested. And I know I just said that I dislike the trope of like people who wouldn't be friends and are just becoming friends because of proximity. I know I just said I don't like that, but it works here. It's very like sitcom-y in the sense of like a workplace comedy where you're like, why do these people spend so much time together outside of work? And it's like, oh, it's because when you spend that much time together, the lines between like friend, family, coworker kind of they blur. And I think it works in the sense because they're kind of, I don't want to say trauma bonding because it's not super traumatic, but they all are going through this thing together, and all they have is each other. And it's fun to see the dynamic shift in episode 2 in a way that, you're right, Sabrina, works very well and is very natural. And I thought this was a very well done episode 2. It doesn't retread a lot of what the pilot did, because I know a lot of episode 2s are like, here's the pilot, but a little bit different. This one like keeps the story going, kind of gives us more introductions to the characters. But all in all, it's a very good episode too. Like, I wouldn't even give the show a 4-episode test. I would just be like, okay, 2 episodes, we're good.
Yeah.
Which is, I know I'm being a hypocrite because I stopped watching after 7 episodes in 2019. But oh well. I can lie if I want to. It's my podcast.
Well, there's a time and a place too. Sometimes that's not when you're supposed to be on the journey. You're on the journey
timing
now.
is right now. The timing was not right back then. I wasn't ready for Nancy, but now I am.
Exactly.
Yeah, I remember, like I said last week, I watched the trailer and I was like, oh, I'll watch that. Never watched that. And I was angry at myself now, or about two years ago when I heard about how good it was. But like, I'm so happy we're doing it now together. It's so much more fun this way.
And look, we need Nancy now more than ever, because it's like I said, it feels so CW in an era where like we're severely lacking in that. And I'm not being dramatic. It's just it's a drought out there. We need Nancy. And I think whether or not we were inspired by the Drew crew, I know I would have been like, Nancy, girl, I'm all in on you now. You're all I got. And I think this episode more than like confirmed that.
Yeah, it's
also. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. I feel like it didn't retread the steps of the pilot. I think that's a great point, because it very much felt like pilot part 2. I said last week how the first part of the pilot felt like pilot part 1, just because it was suddenly cut off by that cliffhanger. And of course, the cliffhanger of the ghost in the background wasn't really that big of a cliffhanger, because it was quickly dealt with until she saw the later visions and the ghost came back more so. But this just very much felt like a continuation of the story. There was very little retread done. And then that like montage where they all kicked over the seawater and George's bucket was bloody, and then of course the father burning the dress, that would have felt like a very good place for a pilot to cut off. Obviously you can't have an 80-minute pilot on the CW, but this felt very much like the end of that first chapter, and I'm really excited to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, because the ending also had a coda that like felt very end of pilot, like you mentioned. Like that song was playing for a while and it worked and it felt very dramatic. And I was like, oh, everybody, it's flying. Got it. Like which, I mean, yes, we did that the previous in the pilot, but like this one felt even more sinister because of the information that we got, and because Nancy's nerves had been settled on the pilot. Her nerves were ratcheted up.
Mm-hmm.
And then in episode 2, she was like, you know what? I've gotten some answers. I'm fine. Only for her dad to be burning a dress, for Nick to have a stowaway phone that Mrs. Hudson called, and now George has a bloody bucket. Like, it's just unsettling, and it works so well. I think the softest ending wasn't an ending, but I guess the softest thing was Ace and Bess, and Ace realizing that Bess does not like boys. And then immediately,
I love Ace so much,
Yes.
guys. It's bad. I love him.
He's so sweet. He immediately pivoted. He was like, "Oh, well then I can be, what was it? Your planacre? I can be your platonic anchor."
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, Ace, that's so cringy, but so sweet.
It is. And Bess loved it because she needs a friend. And he's
got
going to
those
be
puppy
there for
dog
her.
eyes too. It's like, how do you say no to that? I wouldn't.
Oh, I don't know. And neither would Nancy. I think so. I don't know if the Nace fans were there from day one, but I was like, Nancy, I'm into you and Nick, but I see the way you look at Ace sometimes.
I was about to say that, not to be like a shipper, because I know there's so many fans of shows that like they like pause a scene, they're like, look at the way that Robin looked at Nancy, and I'm like, that's Stranger Things reference, and I'm like, I think that was just a convenient freeze frame. But I did clock a look in this episode when they were plotting in the kitchen, the way Nancy looked over at Ace, and I was like, I'm looking.
Yes.
Like the spark wasn't really there mutually, or maybe at all. I don't know. That obviously was not the point of that moment. But I was like, okay, if that's a crumb, I picked it up and I put it in my pocket for later.
Yeah, it's the second time it's happened too, because it did actually happen in the pilot as well. When we first meet him, she double takes as she's looking at him, and I'm like, Nancy, questions.
Relatable. First of all, relatable.
We see you, Nancy.
We do. And I guess Ace is going to see her at some point. But she's looking. We see you, Nancy.
Mm-hmm.
What else for this episode? I don't know. It just felt really, I don't like Mr. Hudson. I don't think I'm supposed to like Mr. Hudson, but it was funny that he took Nancy's dad's advice and came on down there with his, well, no, he didn't come down there. He bought it from the little girl to have a nice moment. And then he carried himself on over down to the rocks looking just as lost, trying to get some seawater so the people would come to him. And they did a long line of people giving condolences. And I was like, I thought y'all didn't like him. Why are there like 30 of y'all in line?
He's another part of the show that really reminds me of Veronica Mars, because there was like, in that show there was also the divide of like the working class and the really rich people that exist in the same town, and he very much gives like the Lily Kane murder in, I don't know if any of you ever watched Veronica Mars, but Lily Kane was Amanda Seyfried, and she was a teen that was murdered by a rich man, and it has those shades of darkness in it. When you go to his house and you see like where he lives again, right? She went to his house in the pilot, but we did see him at his house when George goes to the house. I don't know, I'm all mixed up, but it just had that same kind of like eerie, like he's this really wealthy man, and whenever we see his house, it's all like shadowy and dark, and that kind of, those motifs really add to the characterization of him. And I don't know, it just gave me Veronica Mars, which I appreciate because I love that show.
Yeah, I think Nancy's so good. It's just good. 2 episodes in and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, all on board. Yeah, love it. Sold, hook, line, and sinker.
Yes.